Justin. I'm telling your wife.
All right. She'll know. Just that.
If it's real bad, I can tell her. All right, we're going to get started. We have a few announcements and other things to go through this morning, but we're also waiting for Rick to show up with the projector. Mike.
Do I have to talk into the button? I never know how these things work, because when you're standing next to it or behind it, it's kind of hard to tell what your voice is coming out like. We've got Rick running up to grab a projector for the presentation. But until then, we've got a few things that we can talk about. We've got some announcements coming up. We've got some things coming up. The Digital Communications Conference, if you haven't received an email on it or looked that up, it's one of the big events that we have that comes out here. It's down at the Salt Lake Community College Larry H. Miller campus. That's Sandy or something way out there. Yeah. It's not too hard to get to. It is kind of a little bit of a windy road back there, but they got plenty of space. They have lots of stuff going on. Are they going to do a swap meet again?
No, not that I know of.
Okay. I haven't been in a couple of years. I went the first year they did it, and they do all kinds of classes on just about everything that deals with digital communications. So ham radio gets mentioned quite a bit, and projects like this are in abundance there. So it's next Saturday. What time? 8 o'clock in the morning. You can get your tickets and stuff online. Just look up Digital Communications Conference. It'll show right up. I'm not sure. Do we have that on our website? Is Val here?
No.
Okay. If it isn't, I'll send a reminder email to Val. We'll make sure that gets on the website as well. Yeah, just Google Digital Communications Conference. Get your tickets early. Show up. It's a good time. It's a lot of good information there. Let's see. What else do we have? Some other things coming up. We have in a couple of months we have the W7G that'll be coming up. Our operations up at Golden Spike for the anniversary of the driving of the Golden Spike. That's always a good time. That's always fun. I'm hoping for some good weather again this year. For the past few years, we've had really good weather up there. It's been really nice. It is a really good time to go up there. You get to see the whole event. You get to participate. They don't even charge us an entrance fee for coming up there, and they're glad to have us. So bring the kids, bring the wife, and enjoy the grandkids, whatever, and enjoy the time up there. As well as operate the radio. We do some HF operations. If you don't have an extra class license or a general license, you're still welcome to come and operate the radio. We'll have control operators for you there. We're going to be putting up the information for that soon, and that'll include a sign-up sheet if you want to sign up to operate. Just so we know who will be there and make sure that we have control operators for you. I'm wearing my ARRL hat about once a year. I like to remind people that we are an ARRL affiliated club, which means that over 50% or so of our membership are members of the ARRL. The ARRL is the one that's fighting the good fight for us. They're the ones that are, they're like the NRA are for gun owners, but they're for ham radio operators. They go and they stand up for us in Congress. They fight bills that are going through that aren't good for us. They make a few people seem like a heck of a lot more people because they represent thousands, tens of thousands of ham radio operators.
Dave, we're at 58%, so we need more people to sign up for a good company.
Yeah, we're at 58%. We would like people to sign up. I don't remember what it is. It's like $54 or something a month. A year. Oh, is that a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that, you get the QST magazine or one of the other magazines that they have available. And that right there alone is worth the subscription price. So,
Plus you can go online and read the other.
right, and you have digital access to the other information, all of their information, and you have access to all of the other stuff. They have books and everything else.
As treasurer, if you want to go and spend $54 a month to do, send it to me and I'll forward.
Okay, Jay. I have a hard time remembering some of these details because I bought myself a life membership back before they increased the dues last time, so I don't even remember what I paid for that, but I did that because I really believe in what they're doing and how they're helping us. And the more help that we can get in fighting the constant need for more bandwidth on the air, the better off we are, because Congress just took, what was it, 33,300 megahertz or something, and they gave it to this 5G thing that they're doing all over the country. So I mean, they've just taken big swipes of bandwidth and they're just handing it, well, they're selling it and making money off of it or something, but they're taking it away from us, and that means that we need all the help we can get to prevent that from happening farther.
Right now, ARL is working on this source thing for the increased
Yes.
speeds on repeaters, and the comment period was extended at the end of this month. So if you've not commented yet, you can do it online. It'd be a good thing to remind them of all the service we provide, equipment, maintenance, and not to mention the emergency services
Yeah.
aspect and radio that we're providing.
You're absolutely correct on that. The Forest Service right now, they have communications shacks and other infrastructure that they've put up in various places. Ham radio operators, clubs, emergency services and that use ham radio have had in those, they have a lot of equipment. I know I'll let you have it in just a sec, Mel, when you talk about the VHF Society. I know the VHF Society here in Utah has several that are in shared locations like that, and they're wanting to raise the fees. And so the ARRL is fighting it. We've got a lot of people in the club and outside of the club that have been writing comments on the proposed changes. If you haven't done that yet, you can go down there, go online and do that, leave your comments. I got to emphasize, be respectful, but be factful. And if they raise those fees, they stand to lose the support of some of the ham radio clubs and individuals that can no longer afford to keep those in those locations. And if that happens and an emergency happens, it's going to hurt everybody. So we've been trying to emphasize that for them, but that is one of the things that the ARRL gets involved in at the congressional level as well as the procedural level with the Forest Service. So it's worth the money that you spend a year to support them, and I highly recommend it. And Mel, you said you had something.
Thank you, Dave. Just one point of clarification on the Forest Service comment period. The comment period ends on the 22nd. That's next Tuesday. It's not difficult to go and make comments. We have done a survey of all of the repeaters in Utah, and we've estimated that approximately 20 to 25% are on Forest Service lands. So that means about 25% of the repeaters in the state of Utah would be affected by this fee increase. Just to clarify the fee increase, it's $1,400 per site, not per radio. So if we're in a site all by ourselves, it would cost the operator of that repeater $1,400 a year. If you're in a shared site with 4 or 5 other users, it could be divided if the owner of that property wishes to do it that way. So there's a lot of issues, but for the most part, it's very imperative that we all weigh in and give some comments. It doesn't take a long time to do it. You can go online to their website. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you're not quite sure how to get to the site, just go to the ARL website and just type in Forest Service comments, and they have a little link there that'll help you get to the site and make your comments. If you want, you can type your comments on your computer and just cut and paste it into their website, and it's about that easy. So please consider doing that. It's very worthwhile for all of us to do that. I came specifically to ask any of you that may not have got your annual book for the VHF Society. I've got plenty of them here, so you can pick them up if you've prepaid your dues. If you haven't, you can renew your dues with me. I'll be glad to help you renew your dues. At our last meeting, we made a decision to raise our dues to $17, but that won't be effective until after July. So if some of you want to save a few bucks, you can pay your dues in advance, however you'd like to handle that. And I'd just like to thank all of you who are members, because without your support, we wouldn't be able to keep a lot of the intertie repeaters working. Thank you very much.
That's another thing that's worth spending a little bit of money on every year. That little book that he's got is the repeater book for the area, and it has all of the repeaters in Utah and the intertie and stuff in it. So if you need to know any of that for programming, I just throw mine in my glove box. So that way I have it with me whenever I need it. Okay, we got to find a better spot for this a little bit, make it a little bit bigger, and then we'll get started with the presentation. Is there any other information that needs to come up?
So I wrote a letter based on my role as the vice president of the Ogden Amateur Radio Club Forest Service, and I also talked to, I think it was Congressman, I forget his name just now, but Moore. So you can also let them know. So there's several ways to attack this besides just sounding off with the Forest Service itself. Talk to your federal elected representatives, and they can also put in a good word. I don't know if they will, but I did let them know how we felt about this, and I did call out the fact that a lot of our repeaters are located in places where there is no cell service, and a lot of us do UTV, motorcycles, backcountry things. So we're essentially saving lives and saving money by having those repeaters available. So I call that out so that they understand that that's something that is a good thing to keep on and not charge. You know, if they need money, they can go look elsewhere. But it's good to have us where we're at the present cost, not to where we're paying it. So if that's another option you can take if you want to go ahead and let elected representatives know how you feel about that. Thanks.
That's what we've got. That's what we've got.
It might be. Yeah, the magic.
Okay, so we're going to do the best we can. I hope this is visible to everybody. You know, it's basically there just as a visual aid anyway. I'm going to be trying to talk with you through the presentation about the stuff on the presentation. Excuse me. All right, so All right. So when we did our show and tell, I had brought my little friends over here. This little guy, which is it was interesting to people because it's a Raspberry Pi in a touch screen. And the question was asked, well, what do you do with it? And I said, well, I use it for mobile digital operations. And the question was, what does that mean? So this is basically a presentation on what it is, why it is, and how. So we'll just go through some of this. All right, we're going to talk about what a Raspberry Pi is, HamPi Linux, Raspbian and Andes Linux. There's radio softwares and antennas to consider, and then your activities. In this case, there's SOTA, POTA, Moab, Tahoe, and some other things that we have that we participate in every year, or all, throughout the year. So a Raspberry Pi. I guess. So the light switch is actually in the very back of the room back there. I don't know how they set this up or why they didn't. Anyway, this is an old building. It's been here for quite a long time, so it has some nuances and quirks that they didn't quite fix when they refurbished it. So let's see if that helps. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So a Raspberry Pi is a series or a small set of computers. There are other ones that are similar, but the Raspberry Pi seems to be the most popular. And they're a series of small computers. They're about the size, just a little bit larger lengthwise and widthwise as a credit card. So they're really small. And they're used for all kinds of projects. They were put together by the Raspberry Pi Foundation in association with Broadcom, and they're the ones that make chips. Their idea was to get these computers into schools so that kids could play with them and learn about programming, learn about computers. And their goal was also to keep the price low. Right now, there's a chip shortage. People that have been trying to buy new cars or new trucks, you know about that. There's been pictures on the web of all of these vehicles that are stored out in an old airfield, in an old racetrack, where they're just sitting there because they don't have any chips to finish the computers that they need to run the trucks. Same thing is happening with computers and the Raspberry Pi. So right now you've got people that are selling Raspberry Pis online for $200 or $300 a piece. When the actual computer, if you just buy the little computer, you can usually get it between $60 and $80. So there's a big, huge, massive difference. And I'll get to that a little bit here too. So the history of the Raspberry Pi, it started in February 2012, and the first generation was born. In 2014, they made some improvements. 2015, 2016, we ended up with the Pi 3 Model B. Now they have the Pi 4, which had come out in 2019, and it has 2, 4, and 8 gigs of memory on them. Of course, the price goes up the more memory you buy on the board, but they're still were very affordable, and they're very useful. They have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, other things all built into them. You also have a jack that you can use for the network. So they've got USB connectors, HDMI. I mean, they've really gone out and done a really good job with such a small little form factor. That's actually what it looks like. Right, no, that's onboard memory for the operating system. It has a small slot that's underneath on the other side that you put your micro SD card in there, and that acts as your hard drive.
They do make these so that they can use USB hard drives. There's also what they call a hat. And a hat is a thing that plugs into the GPIO, the set of pins on the side there, that opens up its capability of using other input-output devices, like actually running off of a hard drive. They have one that's a SATA hat that'll run SATA hard drives, including the SSDs. So you can actually do a lot with these. They're just like a regular computer. The only thing is that this thing's about, it's just tiny. If I had my screwdriver, I'd pull off the back of that and show it to you, but it's just tiny. They're just this big. And so you can do a lot with them without spending a lot on them. Or, they're like ham radio. You could probably spend a lot of money if you wanted to.
What OS?
Yeah, we'll get to the OS right now, in fact. So the Raspberry Pi requires an operating system. You've got to have something that runs it. And Debian came out. They're a Linux provider, and they created a thing called Raspbian. And I have the link for that right there. I think that's on there. Anyway, Raspbian's the one that they put together. It doesn't have anything special in it for ham radio operators. So a guy by the name of Andy, I'm guessing, he came out with Andy's ham overlay, basically. So he took Raspbian and he put ham radio stuff in it and created an image for these that runs all kinds of software for ham radio. There's also HamPi, and that was put together as another one of these projects using Raspbian, but it contains a lot more of the stuff that ham radio operators are looking for. And it can actually be installed on top of Debian through an installer, and it can be installed on Andy's stuff. So you can do it both ways. You can either create an image for it that you're running, or run your Raspbian and then install it on top. So HamPi has all of this stuff in there: chirp, APRS. See, there's one thing that we were just talking about: APRS message app for JS8 calls. So you can actually send APRS packets through JS8 call. So there's that kind of thing, and it goes on for 4 or 5 pages. That's all the stuff that they put in there. And then Andy's has a little bit fewer items, but it's still a pretty impressive list of items that they put in there. The nice thing about those operating systems is they don't just, you don't just have to run them on a Raspberry Pi. You can run them on any old hardware. So if you want to do operations and you have an old laptop, you can install these things on an old laptop. You can install Debian, you can install Andy's software on top of it. So you don't have to just use it that way. You can use any old hardware. The nice part about Linux is it gives you the capability to resurrect old hardware that you've got laying around and use it where Windows won't run it anymore. So I've got several machines, including 2 laptops at home that are running, they're running Ubuntu, but that's based on Debian. So it's got more stuff in it that users might want. And you can also use a Raspberry Pi like I've done here. So any old laptop, what you'll need is the old laptop. You'll need a 4 gig or larger thumb drive, and you'll need the softwares for it. I've got the links for everything here. I'll make sure that Val gets this presentation so that you can have all the links for everything. It'll be out on the website sometime this week. So you'll create an image from the ISO file or the IMG file, and you'll use software like either there's multi-boot USB, which is a good piece of software. It works on Windows. You also have Balana Etcher, which doesn't work for Andy's for some reason, but I was able to create, I'm also using a Mac, so you'll have to excuse that. I know most people are using Windows. I got these little thumb drives. I got them for free. They hand them out at all kinds of places. In fact, there will probably be somebody handing them out for free at the Digital Communications Conference. And they'll have their software on it, a demo or some such thing on their thing, and they just give them away. They're usually 4 gigabyte. That's all you need, is something that has 4 gigabyte of space on it. And so you take that, you put the image on it via these softwares, you throw it in the USB port. You might have to adjust your BIOS to look at the USB to boot first. But once it hits that and it boots from it, then you can run it in 2 ways. You can either install Linux and have it be your operating system henceforth and forever, or install it with another operating system like Windows, where it'll just install it on the empty part of your hard drive, or you can run it what they call a live CD or a live demo, where it'll actually run the operating system from your thumb drive. So if you turn off your machine and you have anything that you haven't saved to the thumb drive, it's gone. But at least it'll give you the idea of if it'll work for you and what you want to do. Okay, and then I've got all the links if you want to set up Andy's after the fact. You go to the website. It's actually got like an installer. You run that. It pulls out all of Andy's stuff and just installs it on the machine. And then you've got the Raspberry Pis. You have to use something like the Etcher program. You'll put somewhere. I have one of those. There it is. You'll need an adapter that gives you USB on the one side, and on the inside in here, I have one of the micro SDs. And what that does is that gives me the capability of reading that micro SD from the USB port. This one's a little different. It actually puts it on the inside instead of on the outside, but a lot of them stick it right in the end on the outside. And then you'll take that, and it needs to be at least 4 gig, but if you're going to use it as your operating system on a Raspberry Pi, what you're going to want to do is have one that's bigger. Luckily, they're really cheap now. You can actually get them really cheap. I bought some 32 gigabyte ones for like $10, $15 each. So, you can pick up some of those. And then you put them in, and you do the same thing that you did with the other one. Well, let me go back one, or maybe forward one. So you'll do the same thing. You'll put that in there. You'll burn the image onto that thumb drive, onto that micro SD, and then you put it in that little slot and you add power. And when it boots up, it'll come up and have everything, the whole operating system, everything that you wanted on there. It'll boot it up, it'll run it, and you're off and running. There are a couple of other things that you will have to worry about. The Raspberry Pi does not come with a monitor or a keyboard or anything else like that. So you'll have to pick up that stuff on your own. You'll need an adapter. I should have brought mine. I didn't. I might have one in the bag over there. It goes from the micro HDMI to a regular HDMI port, so that you can just plug that in. I use those kind of things on this laptop because this laptop comes with USB-C, and it does everything through the USB-C. So to go from here to the projector, I've got USB-C to HDMI to the projector. So it's the same type of thing with the Raspberry Pis. I think the next version will probably be USB-C instead of HDMI and all that stuff, just because the hardware now is very affordable and very available. So, but what you'll need is other things like keyboards, and it'll do Bluetooth keyboards. It'll do the 2.4 gigahertz ones like this one, but you'll need something along these lines. This little guy has the keyboard and the mouse all integrated, but it's got really, really tiny little keys. So I bought a different one that gives me a little bit more space, and it folds out, so it folds up and takes up less space, but it folds out and gives you more space. So, and it also has the touchpad and everything on the side there. And an old one that I had just laying around the house, which was from Logitech, was this one, and it's got the same thing. You've got the touchpad on the one side, but you've got a full-size keyboard there. But it's harder to pack. So, and then you'll have to have the adapter to get you to the HDMI. Then once you're up and running, you've got everything configured that you need to get configured. You don't have to use the monitor anymore. If you want to use it as a server or any type of other thing, you can. Okay, we're going to go back one. If I can find my back key. Does that do it? Okay, so there are several places that you can buy Raspberry Pis. I mentioned that they're in short supply right now. One of the things that does is it makes it so that people will take advantage of you. They went out and they bought a whole bunch of them at some point, or the suppliers had some and they bought a tremendous number of them. So now the suppliers are limiting your purchasing power for those. They're giving you 3 to 5 at a time. But what some people are doing is they're turning around and selling them. Instead of $80 each, they're selling them for $200 or $300 each. And people are buying them at that price. These are all of the official sites that are licensed by Raspberry Pi by the Raspberry Pi Foundation to sell them. And most of them are out of stock. Okay? There are a few of them that have some of the 2 gigabyte versions. You can still get them, and it's not a problem. But a lot of them are out, and as they get more, they post them out there and they sell like hotcakes. So keep your eye on these places. There's some of them you might have seen on like Amazon, are CanaKit and Vilrus and Adafruit, and they sell them through Amazon as well as other medium as well. Just make sure you're buying from them.
Just for your information,
Radio Shack has them. Okay. I would check that. I don't know if they're on the approved list, but if they're selling them for the right price, that would be worth looking into. Apparently there's the Raspberry Pi Foundation's brick and mortar store in the UK that has them as well, and you can order them from them. However, when they ship them over to you, you have to pay the VAT tax and an import tax of some kind. So it might not, I don't know what those taxes end up being, but it might not be as affordable that way. You can always check into that. So here's where I talk a little bit about the stuff you'll need. You'll need a power supply. They run on 5 volts, and you have to have 3 amps. So if you have any of the cell phone chargers that charge with the new Kai charging, where you just set your phone on the little pad and it charges your phone, those are 3.1 volts, or 3.1 amps. So those power supplies will actually work to power your Raspberry Pi. I think some of the smaller Raspberry Pis, there's the Raspberry Pi Zero, which is even smaller than the Raspberry Pi. It'll run off of one of the older cell phone chargers. So 2-point-something volts, 2-point-something amps. Still, again, 5 volts. So you can run it off of just about anything. The problem for mobile operations is that you're usually driving around in a vehicle, or you have a generator, or you have batteries or something, and you're producing 12 volts. So you have to be able to convert that. And I think in my bag down there, I have one of those step-down converters that takes 12 volts and makes it into 5 volts. Or this little screen that I have is operating off of 12 volts, and it has a converter in it that takes it down to 5 volts for the Raspberry Pi. So I don't have to worry about it with that. I can just plug it straight into a battery. And that's the one that I chose. It's 10.1 inches, made by a company called UPerfect. I'm pretty sure it's just some Chinese company. but you can find these all over the place. They do have other sizes. I have one here. This is the one that I first bought. It's 3.5 inches. Your entire screen is 3.5 inches at that point. I found it too small to use. You have to get this little, if you ever had a BlackBerry or one of those other PDAs back in the day, they had the little stylus. And some of the newer phones, I guess, are coming out with those too, because they keep making phones bigger and bigger. But I had to use one of those to operate this thing. And it's, I think this one's, anyway, it is a touch screen, but it's one of the cheaper type of touch screens. I think this one actually quit working at one point. I'm not exactly sure, but it was just too small to use. And my whole purpose for doing this was to be able to operate digital mode remotely. So I needed to have something that was bigger, something I could actually see. 10.5 inches is still pretty small, but it's still usable. And this is another type of the keyboard. It's the same type of thing that you have there, but I believe this one is Bluetooth. So you don't need the extra dongle that you would plug into one of the USB ports. You just pair it with it through Bluetooth, and then you're able to use it that way. So they did make the Raspberry Pi very functional. It's just a little tiny computer, has all the bells and whistles as far as connectivity and things go. But it's very low power, so you can take it with you. Okay, so the radio, it says the best radio to use for remote operations is the radio you have. I've been using my ICOM 718. It works really good for digital communications, for that kind of thing. I've been playing with the ICOM 7300. I've also been looking at some other radios, but you know, if you've used an older radio, you know the stuff that you need already. You got to have your signal link or your there's a new one that just came out. I should have written that one down. But they're the sound card interfaces, basically, that connect between your computer and your radio for the radios that don't have that on board. The ICOM 7300 already has the sound card built into it. The only thing you need is a USB cable. You plug that in, you plug it directly into the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi installs your drivers, and you're ready to go.
Dave, I noticed in the new HRO catalog we got, they now have a USB that will convert install the USB plug. Just plug it
Okay.
in.
I don't know if
That's how it works, but-
I don't know if I brought one. I do have one that's really similar to that. It's a sound card that goes into the USB thing, and it's about 1.5 inches long, and it just has the two plugs in it for the audio. So you can plug that in and make that work as well. The nice part is that you set everything up beforehand, and then you know it's all there, and then you just plug your radio in and everything works. Or you plug your signal link or this other thing, or the newer ones. There's West Mountain Radio has one. It's called the Rig Blaster, I believe, right? Tigertronics with their signal link, which is probably one of the most popular. There's a couple of Chinese companies that have been producing some knockoffs that work fairly well. And there's a new one that they were just talking about on someone's podcast the other day that they are trying out. That's, it's about this big. It's black. It's really small compared to the Tigertronics one, which is fairly small by itself. So you'll need something along those lines for the older computers. But for the newer ones, like I said, all you need is that USB cable. You plug it into the back, you plug it into your Raspberry Pi, and you're ready to go. So you'll need another way to support your radio, and since radios operate off of batteries just fine, now all you need is a vehicle or a battery, some kind of way to recharge that battery, so solar panels. You can use a generator and a power supply if you want, There's a lot of different things that you can do for your remote operations. I didn't want to get too deep into that because we're just trying to talk more about how the Raspberry Pi supports that. But this is one example of one way to do remote operations. I know several people in the club have built things like this, just go boxes with a radio. Sometimes they put batteries in there, some of the small, 12 amp hour batteries, something along those lines, that'll operate the radio for several hours without trouble. You need something like that. Or in my case, you just drive your truck wherever you want to go. I've got the HF radio under the seat. And then you have the software, and we covered a lot of the software. This is FT8, and it's installed on the Raspberry Pi, so it can be run and you can make your communications. So you have your keyboard, you've got your display, you've got your software, you've got the computer, you've got your interface between the computer and the radio, and you're all ready for HF communications with digital mode. And the antennas, I'm not going to go really into a whole lot of antennas because I use the G5RV, and Gene hates that.
No. I was going to ask you about time source. You know time source, right?
Time source, yes. And I'm going to get to that. So the antennas, you can do all kinds of stuff. You're going to need an antenna, you're going to need a balun or an unun, you're going to need a choke maybe, you'll need a tuner. Or most radios will tune 3 to 1, but if you want to get better than that, you'll need a tuner. So make sure you have one. A lot of them are not powered. They get their power from the radio or some such thing. Some of them are, and they require a 12-volt source. So there again, huh?
Or 9 volt.
Or 9 volts. Some of them have built-in batteries that are different. A lot of them will have an outlet on the back that you just plug into it with a 12-volt source. And there again, 12 volts, you got your 12-volt batteries. See, you're ready to go if you're all set up inside your car. But here's one example of a mobile antenna. Some of these guys, mine actually hooks up into the receiver hitch in the back, and I can put up those fiberglass poles like what we have with the club. I went out and bought a bunch of them from Smith & Edwards and some other sources. I can put that antenna up about 50 feet, I think, 40-something feet. It's really difficult to do on your own. Gil knows how to do it, and I'm going to have to watch him do it this June when we get to field day, because mine doesn't set up quite like that because I have to put it in the receiver hitch thing to hold it up at the bottom, but it still would be interesting to figure out how to get up a little higher.
It takes a little more planning.
Yeah.
Once you get it set up, you need to take some accurate measurements so that you can duplicate it.
Yeah, and if you can keep it straight and everything, once you get it up, and then you can tie down the guy lines by yourself. What he's got is, it's a platform that goes underneath the tire on the back there, and that holds the base of the antenna up. So there's all kinds of ways that you can do this. There's no right or wrong way. A lot of people are using random long wire or long wire type antennas. I've got a balun that I bought from Gene. What is it, a 9 to 1? Something like that. So I could measure out a length of wire, and I could throw it out there, and I could be up and running with that. So
I use dual ham sticks in the dipole configuration. They work great.
yeah,
About 30 feet.
I'm actually testing that out right now with those 102-inch steel whip antennas. They're kind of heavy for that dipole converter thing. They're kind of pulling on it really hard, but they seem to be holding up all right. And I haven't had a really good test with it yet. I can get it to tune, but getting people to hear me off of it is a whole nother thing. So I may play with that a little bit more.
I worked the world on 20 meters a couple years ago for the AIRU contest up in Montana that way. Anybody wants to talk to pretty much.
Yeah, so there's other ways to do it. I know that configuration's really similar to like the buddy poles and stuff like that, where you can just trade out your antennas for different bands. And if you're tuned up, if your antennas are tuned, then you don't even need the tuner. You just swap antennas
you're on the next band. Okay, then there's some accessories. You're going to need a couple of things. One of them, especially for FT8 and JS8 call, I don't know about any of the others, but those two, because they come from the same source, they require that you have a time source. You have to be able to time sync them. And there's a couple of ways to do it. You can do it through the guesswork in the software, where you click the little button that says, now I can't remember what it says. It says something about adjusting the time, or time delay, or something like that. But you push that button, and the software looks at the latest signals coming in and makes an adjustment onto the software by itself. It does a best guess. You have to be within, what, 3 seconds? 2 seconds? 1. Okay, so this number keeps getting smaller. I think for JS8 call it's 3 seconds or something. It's not, JS8 call is not as finicky or something. It's not as precise. It was designed to be a little more flexible, where FT8 wasn't. FT8 has a specific purpose, contesting. You're not doing rag chews over FT8. JS8 call you can. So it's a little bit different method of communication, a little different way of doing it. But if you want to set that up with Linux, either in the laptop or on the Raspberry Pi, you can actually use something called GPSD and Crony. And GPSD, what it does is it uses one of these little buggers. This is a GPS antenna and receiver. It's all built into this little thing. It's weatherproof. You can put it outside. It's not a problem, and it works great. And I did some research into them. There's a ton of them. Some of them are just little dongles you plug into the side of the laptop or the Raspberry Pi. Some of them have a longer pigtail to them. The Raspberry Pi also has a GPS hat that you plug right into the top of it, and has an external antenna. So you plug the antenna in, you can put it wherever you want it. But your Raspberry Pi will stay wherever you put it, inside your little case or whatever. So there's all kinds of ways to do it, but the software is what you're going to need. GPSD and Crony are two of the softwares that you'll need. GPSD takes that information from the GPS signal and makes sense of it for your software. Because the information's just coming in, it's formatted in its own way, it's made for a specific purpose, but you can actually translate that for use. I've got the links for those. There's all kinds of how-tos on how to set this up. I've had a hard time with mine. My GPSD will not start up when the computer starts up. So I have to start it up manually every time I want to use the GPS on it. No problem, it's a simple line command, but I haven't figured out how to get it to kick off at the beginning of the thing. It says, all you got to do is go into the config file and you set this setting to true. Yep, that's where mine's at. It still won't start up at the beginning. I followed another command that says you use system control, systems CTL command to start it up at and it puts it into the startup directory or something. And it says, it gives me an error and says there are too many symlinks. And other people have run into it. I haven't found a solution for it. So I just kick it off every time when I start up the radio. I run a command through the command line. It starts it up, everything runs fine. Crony works with the whole system as your timekeeper. So you have NTP that they use by default, and then you have Crony. You can replace NTP with Crony. And it has a list of all the input sources of where your time is coming from. So if you're connected to Wi-Fi or to the network, it has these URLs that it goes to get its network time. When it doesn't have those available, it just doesn't get network time until you put the GPS on there, and then you add that to that list. Now it can look at the GPS and it can pull out the GPS time. So that's how I set that. You can set it in another way. I haven't done this, so I don't know how it works. I just know it's possible. You can use your cell phone. Your cell phone has GPS on it, has Bluetooth. You can connect your cell phone to the Raspberry Pi.
The how-to is on here. It's a YouTube video. The guy talks about how to do it. I've only watched part of the video. But you can put an app on your phone that allows it to forward a readable version of the GPS information to your cell phone or to your Raspberry Pi. Then you still have to have a way to get it through the Raspberry Pi, and I think he talks about that in that video. And then the other way is with the hat. You can put the hat on the thing. Now all the GPS stuff is all on board. You can put that. That costs a little bit more. Those hats aren't exactly cheap. They're not super expensive. But they give you the capability of having it all in one package. So if you wanted to put it in your car and have a way to track your car wherever it goes by plugging that into the 12-volt source, you can do that. It's pretty big, bulky once compared to some GPS trackers, but I kind of wish I would have had something like that. A few nights ago, last week, someone decided they wanted the stuff in my truck more than I did. So a guy broke into my truck. He didn't steal anything super expensive. He took my go bag. It had my camping gear and a bunch of other stuff in it. Figured probably about $700 worth of stuff. But he left the radios. He also left all the money. Not that I have a whole lot of money just sitting in my car, but there's maybe $5 and change in the thing. He also left all of the gift cards, the Maverick cards. I've got like $50 in Maverick cards in there that I use for emergencies. He left all of that. He took my little tool kit, he took my go bag, he took a couple other small things that he could stuff in his pockets, and he took off. Got him on video, filed the police report. We'll see what happens. So far I haven't seen anything show up at the pawn shops or anything, but if I would have had something inside the bag that could have helped me out a little bit, this might have been too bulky for that kind of thing, but there are other things you can use. And this is the same type of item that I bought. This one's a different brand, but it's the same device. All right, so why are we doing all this? How many of you have heard of SOTA? Summits on the Air. How many of you have heard of POTA? Parks on the Air. Yeah. The ARRL did, what was it, National Parks on the Air or something back in 2018, where they were doing the same thing as like POTA, but they were just doing national parks, and you could go running around and both transmit and receive from a national park, and you got points for it. That's the kind of stuff that a lot of people like to do. They go camping, they want to use radio. You have a camper you want to take and go places, and you want to use your radio. So if you're into FT8 and that kind of stuff, then this is a good way to start. We also have things like Field Day. Who's ever heard of Field Day? Okay. Then there's Utah SAG, and they're always doing remote operations. I don't think they use any of the digital modes, but that doesn't mean that at some point in the future they can't. I was talking with Mickey the other day at the VHF Society swap meet. He was telling me some stories about how they used to use, I'm trying to remember what it was, Packet or something, and they had all these radios connected up that way. They had repeaters all over the place, and everything was being done through a spreadsheet. So there are places where digital modes could come in real handy for something along those lines. What else do we got? Okay, we have things like Moab and Tahoe, and these are more specialized things. They're not like club events or anything like that. I go down and I support the Moab 240 every year. The Moab 240 is an endurance run. These guys are crazy. Most of us are when it comes to things that we like to do. They go down there and they run through the mountains of Moab 240 miles. Now, it's not really a race per se. They're not trying to beat each other. They're trying to just endure the race. So that's an endurance run. Okay? The guy that made it through last year, he was the fast runner last year. He came through like 2 days ahead of his competition. So he was really ready for it and prepared and crazy. Really nice guy though, he really is. But we go up there and we support them in that. They have aid stations all throughout the route, and we make sure that they have communications. Last year we had a heart attack. We made sure to get the help in for that guy to get him to the hospital. We had someone fall and they had a cut in their knee that went right down to the bone. We got them to the hospital. We helped coordinate all the communications and everything that way. And we always have people asking, where is runner so-and-so? Well, all of that information is held at base camp. So in order for us to get them that information, we have to call down to base camp, get them the information, and we can have it to them. But we can do that within minutes, right? They don't have to run back or get on the phone. And phone is very spotty out there. In some places you have good phone signal, in some places you have no phone signal. So using ham radio is the only way to have good communications. This year we're going to go out and help with Tahoe. It's the Tahoe 200, and it's the same thing as the Moab 240. It's 200 miles through the mountains of Tahoe, and these guys are going to be running around there. But we don't have any good places to put up repeaters. And the repeaters that are there are usually in use by clubs for different club functions and stuff. So we're trying to train up some of their club members out there so that they can support this, so that we don't have to go out there and support it, because that's a long ways to go. Yeah.
Locally, we do the Wasatch 100, which is a 100-mile race. But another one that the Victorland Club up in Logan does, they do the La Jojo, which is a bike race all the way from Logan up to Jackson Hole. And they do a lot of repeater relays and things to help the bike races.
Yeah, and if they decided to, I mean, in a lot of those places we have a lot of good repeaters. I know we've got good repeaters up through there. In some places we just don't have that capability. So in this one we're going to be doing the NVIS. This is what we're training for right now that I've mentioned. We're doing NVIS communications with digital. So we're using JS8, and we're trying to communicate. Currently it's just here in the state, but one of the guys that we're talking with is down in Delta, or over in Delta. Anyway, he's down there, and when I first set up everything, and I was able to communicate with them down in Utah County, over in Delta, and I can't remember where the other guy was. I think it was Cedar City, and we were all able to communicate anywhere between a +10 to a -22. So pretty good communications. The software takes care of all of that stuff so that we don't have to worry so much about it. Some of those signals are down in the weeds. You'd never be able to hear them, but the software does a really good job with it. So that's why we're using digital communications. We're going to be setting up all around in Tahoe, and we're going to be doing NVIS. So that's just another one of those things. You're right, we have the Wasatch 100, we have a couple other things. There's the Salt Lake City Marathon, there's the Ogden Marathon. There's all kinds of things that we could help support with radio communications, and if they decided to use digital communications, we could use that easily through this area. So if you want to help with that kind of stuff, that is one place that Mickey and Utah SAG and several other orgs could use that help. This is my setup when I was set up out there. As I said, my antenna fits in the receiver hitch in the back of that thing. That's up, so about 16 feet on that one. And it was high enough, if you tried to use your handheld radio at ground level, you couldn't hit net control. Or it was really spotty hitting net control. Going up just 16 feet or so up in the air like that, I was able to hit net control full quieting. So sometimes it doesn't take much to be able to improve your communications. There's the little leg sticking out up on top up there. I have a little arm that goes in there that I hoist up my G5 RV, to Gene's chagrin. I'm sorry, Gene, that's never going to get old. It's funny.
If you're not careful, you'll write another article.
No, Gene's got some great articles. If you haven't read his stuff in the club's newsletter, you need to read it. It's very eye-opening, very informative on antennas, which is one of the things that make these remote operations work. You've got to have the ability to get your signal out. I'm going to be trying a couple of different things here in the next couple of months while we get ready. This Tahoe will be happening in June this year. It used to be happening in October. They changed it to June because October is right in the middle of the fire season, apparently. And 2 years in a row, well, along with COVID, but they've had fires in that area. And last year we were getting ready to go. They gave us the permits and everything to go, and they had to cancel a week before because the Forest Service and CAL FIRE pulled all the permits and closed the area to camping and everything else because of the wildfires going on. So that kind of stuff happens, but we didn't get to go, but you can, and we're going to this year because of we're moving it to June. So, but that's basically how I pack all my stuff. I'm trying to find a better way to do the tent that works. It's not insulated, so it's not great for like last year when I had an inch of snow one morning on the top of the tent. But I don't know what else to do right now. All the rest of the tents that I want to buy that are 4-season tents are like real expensive. So I'll figure it out. But that's one of the pictures that we had out there that night, or the night before. That was just beautiful out there. It's a lot of fun. You get to go out camping and use radio. What more fun could you have? Beer. I'm not sure I would enjoy that very much, but to each their own. I was thinking fishing, and I know there's a river there, but the river is actually way back over that direction in that picture. This is over towards the, this is about halfway point in the Tahoe run. They start at, when you're coming into town, there's the RV camp and park stuff there. That's where the start of the race is, and the runners go down by the river. They follow the river down. They go up through a couple of the little hilly areas. I won't call them mountains. They're kind of small on that side. And then they get about halfway, and just after they pass this area, they go back across the highway. They go over to the foothills of the La Salles, and then they climb the La Salles. And they go across the top of the La Salle Mountains for quite some distance. And then right at the end again, they come back down the La Salles towards the river and end up right back where they started. So it's a complete loop. This is about halfway through. So the river's way out there, but it is pretty good fishing, I understand. So I might have to take some time this year and take the fishing pole.
The rivers will dry up instead.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. So anyway, this has been the presentation. I hope I've covered everything for remote operations with digital stuff. These little Raspberry Pis are very useful. And like I said, they're very low power consumption. So a small solar panel and your batteries, and you should be able to operate for a very long time on the digital modes that way. And this is that picture I told you I got of that guy. I wish we could get I sent the whole video to the police department, so we're hoping they'll be able to clear that up. But it's a clear shot of his face even.
Where's that at?
My driveway.
Get a close up.
Yeah, like I said, I sent them some stuff. So are there any questions?
What is the power configuration, the input for the Raspberry Pi?
It is USB, it's 5 volts, but it's using a USB-C connector for the power, I think.
On the Pi 4, not the...
On the Pi 4. The other Pis are using
the
micro USB, and yeah.
But
You
they need
could.
a lot of amps though, right? They need like 3
They need, yeah. For the Pi 4, you need the 3.1 amp. So any of those, like I said, any of those power supplies that charge your phones, the fast chargers, the smart Ki charging, that kind of stuff, they're all 3.1 amps. They'll run them. Or you just buy Adafruit and those guys, they sell power supplies that you can buy. A lot of them are really nice. They have a little switch on them, so you can just turn it off and on about 2 inches near the Raspberry Pi, so you can plug that in, turn it off and on as you need. With this configuration, with the monitor, I can just plug it into a 12-volt source, and it converts it down to 5 for the Raspberry Pi, but it runs everything. Runs the monitor, everything. So
The Raspbian BIOS will give you a low lightning bolt up in the corner if you're running on low power, but low amperage.
it will.
Bump it up to like 2.4 amps or higher.
It'll actually run on lower amperage,
Yeah,
which
but it'll
surprised
give
me,
you the
but
lightning bolt.
it'll give you a warning that it's doing so. Did you have something, Gil?
Yeah, you talked about the JSA call and your NBIS, and you also talked on the net about doing a test on Wednesday night, and I was really curious as to your results, because I didn't stay up late enough to see what you were doing.
My results weren't all that great. Currently, I have my antenna. I'm not at a good NVIS height. I don't know exactly. I'm 35 feet off the ground at the center of the G5 RV. 80. Yeah, I thought that should have been good, but I'm not getting much of anything on the receive, and I'm not getting any response from anybody on transmit. So the G5 RV. See? So I'm going to bring it down just a little bit and try again this Wednesday, but that's the whole point we're doing this. We're trying to figure out what's going to work for us when we go out to the field. The final test, which we'll do right before we leave, it'll probably be on a Saturday. Our final test for that is we're going to do a remote operation. We're going to pack up the truck. You know, everybody's going to pack up all their stuff ready for the trip. We're going to go to, a near park, whatever, set everything up, and do some contacting that way with the group, and make sure that we can hit people in the communications group.
Me?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Have you ever thought about trying an off-center fed instead of a G5RV?
I've thought about a lot of things. The problem is having the stuff that I need to be able to do it. I do have the Ballon, or is it an Unan? What is that thing called?
Well, for the G5RV,
The- Yeah, I've got a 1-to-1. I've got that 9-to-1 that you got me. Is that a Ballon?
that's for a long wire.
Yeah.
For an off-center fed, you can use 4 to 1.
Okay, I think I have one of those too somewhere that I picked up at a sale or something.
You might want to try 20 feet. That's more NVIS.
Okay, 20 feet up?
Too high for
Yeah, you're too high.
Yeah, I put it up that high because that's where the G5 RV likes to be for regular communications. But I'm sitting, I'm sitting in this bowl right next to. I'm just down the street from Rick, and we're sitting in this bowl down there, and I don't think 35 feet's even high enough to get out of that. But it's really, we call it the Riverdale radio dead zone. It's pretty bad through here. The antenna that we have on top of the roof up here is actually at a really good height. And when I was using it, I was hitting stations in Georgia and Pennsylvania. So the takeoff angle from here is a little bit better.
So, Dave, on that G5RV, part of the problem is the vertical fin weight, especially being down in the bowl, because the signals coming off of that are being totally wasted. You want to get the signal in the air, so it'd probably be better to just use a regular double fed with coax. At least then you'd be getting as much signal as you can in the air instead of wasting signal in between.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. I know the club has one, right? So I might want to borrow that at some point, and I can hoist that up and try it. Another thing that I was going to look at is trying the long wire and just throwing that up in my neighbor's 8,000 foot tall oak tree in the back, seeing how well I could use that. That's a good question. I prefer 40. I was at least getting some kind of signal on, and but then like I said, I also had the antenna much lower. And 20, I'm able to contact on 20 from where it's at right now. So
The reason I think why they were wanting to do the 80 was on a kind of propagation during the day and all, because you're going to be running over there 24 hours. So they were trying to hit the prime for the 80 because they thought they'd lose some propagation throughout the day. Wasn't that what they were talking about?
If I remember right, it's something like that. They had some reasons. I leave the big decisions like that up to people that know what they're doing. So they're also talking about doing changes in the frequency. I don't think they've got their whole plan set up yet. We've still got a couple of months to work out the details. So they were talking about having to maybe do 20 during some times and then switch to 40 or 80 or something at other times. But the whole point is to give that a try and see how we're doing. So at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night when we're testing this, 80 should be fine. But I'm not having a good time with it at this point. And I can't get the dipole, the 204-inch whip dipole that I've created. I can't get it to tune at 80, so it just won't do it. But I do have, I think I have a ham stick, an 80 ham stick that's in the garage. Maybe I'll have to buy a twin to it and stick those on there and see if they work. They'll hang down just a little bit, but they might work. Any other questions?
G5RV will now be known as the Gene5RV.
The Gene 5 RV?
You know, I used the G5RV for quite a few years, and I found similar problems. And I took it out and just put in a regular 40-meter dipole, and it works better than my G5RV.
Yeah, and I think that I might end up doing something along those lines, just a 40-meter doublet, because you can tune that to 80 because it's a harmonic. You can tune it to 20. You can tune it to supposedly to 10 because they're all harmonic. So you should be able to get it tuned to do various things. I might end up going that route when all's said and done. We'll see what happens. I do have enough coax. When I do remote operations, one of the things I use for coax is the RG8X because it's thin, it's small, it's easy to work with. I can pack a ton of it in my kits. So I've got about 100 feet of that I use. So I put that onto the antennas, I send them up, and then I connect to them at the bottom with the other coax that I use to hook up to the radio. It just makes my life a heck of a lot easier. I also found that if I get a switch, I can put a switch on it and I can switch from different antennas. So if I hoist up 2 or more antennas, I can hook into the bottom of that and just switch it if I need to switch bands. So, any other questions? Okay, I hope you found this a little bit useful. The Raspberry Pi is a fun little project to work with, and it's very versatile. Fairly easy too. If you don't have a whole lot of computer experience, it's not really difficult. It just requires a little bit of reading to figure it out, and you can't do anything wrong. If you screw something up, you just start over and wipe the little the micro SD or the thumb drive. You just wipe them and you're fine. So anyway, that's it. Thanks for coming. Is there anything else for club business that we need to take care of? There's some donuts over here that need to be eaten. Please help yourself. And thank you, Pete, for bringing those.